The sound of that slap echoed louder than the deafening roar of the conveyor belts. For a split second, the entire warehouse went completely dead silent. You could hear a pin drop in that sweltering metal box. My head snapped to the side from the sheer force of the impact. I tasted a warm, metallic tang of blood pooling in the corner of my mouth. Hector screamed out in pure terror, scrambling backward and shielding his face. Richard just stood there, shaking out his hand like my jaw had somehow inconvenienced his knuckles. He adjusted his expensive silk tie, looking at me like I was a piece of garbage he had just scraped off his shoe. "Are you deaf, boy?" he snarled, his face twisted in absolute disgust. I said, "Get out of my building before I have you arrested for trespassing." I slowly turned my head back to face him. I did not rub my cheek. I did not cower. I did not look down. I just stared directly into his eyes, and I let out a slow, dark chuckle. His smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second. He was a bully, and bullies are not used to people smiling after they hit them. "You think this is funny?" he yelled, stepping forward to try and intimidate me again. I reached into the inner pocket of my heavy, sweat-soaked work vest. Richard's two supervisors immediately tensed up, stepping in front of him defensively. They thought I was pulling a weapon. In a way, I absolutely was. But it was not a gun or a knife. I pulled out a solid gold and blue shield, attached to a thick leather holder. I flipped it open and held it right up to Richard's face. The harsh fluorescent lights caught the engraved letters perfectly. Federal Agent, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. "I am not trespassing, Richard," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy, stifling air like a razor blade. "I am executing a federal inspection warrant, and you just assaulted a federal officer." The color completely drained from Richard's face in an instant. He went from looking like a cocky billionaire to a terrified ghost in less than 2 seconds. He stumbled backward, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the sweat-slicked concrete. His mouth opened and closed, like a fish suffocating on dry land. But no sound came out. I reached back into my vest and pulled out the encrypted walkie-talkie. I pressed the transmit button. "This is Agent Marcus. Code red. Breach the perimeter." I repeat, breach the perimeter immediately. "We have a critical medical emergency, illegal confinement, and an assault on a federal officer. Send everyone in." Before Richard could even process what was happening, the entire warehouse shook. The screeching sound of heavy armored tires skidding on the asphalt outside echoed through the metal walls. Red and blue strobe lights began flashing intensely through the cracks in the ceiling vents. We heard a massive, deafening crash at the front of the building. Federal tactical agents and local SWAT teams used a breaching ram to smash through the reinforced steel doors that Richard had locked. Dozens of heavily armed officers flooded into the warehouse. They were shouting orders, securing the perimeter, and calling in the paramedics. The two supervisors in the neon vests immediately dropped to their knees, putting their hands behind their heads. They were crying, begging, swearing they were just following orders and did not want to go to jail. But Richard actually tried to run. The man who just told us we were not allowed to drink water was suddenly sprinting toward the back emergency exit. He did not make it 10 feet. Two massive tactical officers tackled him straight into a stack of wooden pallets. The sound of his custom Italian suit ripping apart was absolute music to my ears. They yanked his arms painfully behind his back, shoving his face into the dusty concrete. I walked over slowly, looking down at him as they slapped the heavy steel handcuffs on his wrists. He was covered in dirt, sweating profusely, and hyperventilating in sheer panic. "Please," he squeaked, his voice cracking like a coward. "You do not understand. I have investors. I have strict deadlines to meet." I crouched down so I was right at his eye level. "The only deadline you have now is your federal court date," I whispered coldly. "You locked human beings in a 104-degree oven. You denied them water. You denied them basic medical care. That is not business, Richard. That is a crime against humanity, and you are going to pay for every single second of suffering you caused today." Paramedics rushed in with stretchers and oxygen tanks. They immediately got to Thomas, packing him in ice and starting an emergency IV drip. They told me later that if we had waited even 5 more minutes, his organs would have completely shut down. Hector came up to me, still shaking. But this time, he had a smile on his face. A real, genuine smile of pure relief. He shook my hand, tears streaming down his face, thanking me over and over again. The entire warehouse of exhausted, broken workers erupted into cheers. They were clapping, hugging each other, crying tears of absolute joy. The reign of terror was finally over. By the time they hauled Richard out to the police cruiser, local news helicopters were already circling overhead. The camera crews caught every second of his public humiliation. The great, untouchable CEO, crying like a child with warehouse dirt smeared all over his face. Within 24 hours, all his major corporate contracts were permanently canceled. His board of directors immediately threw him under the bus to save themselves. The Department of Labor did not just fine him, they completely shut down his entire logistics network. They set up a multi-million-dollar victim compensation fund for Hector, Thomas, and every single worker who had been abused under his watch. Thomas made a full recovery, by the way. With the settlement money he received, he actually retired and bought a beautiful small house near a lake for him and his 2 granddaughters. He never has to lift a heavy box in a hot warehouse ever again. Richard was charged with false imprisonment, criminal negligence, and assaulting a federal officer. He lost his massive company. He lost his luxury mansions. He lost his freedom. He is currently serving a 15-year sentence in a maximum security federal penitentiary, a place that, ironically enough, does not have air conditioning in the summer. This is not just a story about a bad boss getting what he finally deserved. This is a loud wake-up call about your rights as a human being. Under the Occupational Safety and Health Act, you have the absolute legal right to a safe workplace. You have the right to refuse dangerous work without any fear of retaliation or getting fired. No job, no paycheck, and no arrogant manager is ever worth risking your life or sacrificing your dignity. If you are in a situation where you are being exploited, do not just take it. Document everything. Learn the rules, work smart, and reach out to the authorities. Now, I want to ask you a very serious question. I want you to imagine you were standing in that sweltering warehouse right next to me. You see an older man collapse from the heat, and your manager completely locks the fire doors to keep you working. Do you stay silent to protect your paycheck and your family, knowing a good man might die on that floor? Or do you risk losing everything you have to break down that door and fight back against the elite? Tell me what you would honestly do in the comments right now. Do not lie to yourself. Your answer reveals exactly who you are when the pressure is truly on. If you believe in standing up for what is right, hit that subscribe button. Join this community of unstoppable wolves. Let us keep exposing the arrogant elite who think they are untouchable, and build our own true freedom together.